Hi everyone, I'm Nick Olivo, and today we're looking at how to use ScriptCard libraries in Roll20. And one of the things I absolutely love about the ScriptCard mod is how it gives us the ability to track class resources as we gain or spend them. So as your monk gains or spends key points, as your beast heart gains or spends ferocity, or as your Jaeger gains and spends focus points, ScriptCards gives us a really nice way to track that so we don't have to do it manually. Thing is, as you build out your script cards, you may find yourself copying and pasting a lot of the same code over and over again. For example, right here you can see that I've got the same code written multiple times across several script cards to check and see if my Jaeger currently has focus points available. And that's not very efficient because we're rewriting the same code over and over again, which is kind of bloating out the script card. And if we realize later on we need to make a change to that code, we have to make that change in multiple places. And then we might miss it in a spot, and then we are not performing the calculation properly. So libraries are going to solve that problem for us. We're going to be able to write these bits of code once, put them in a library, and then reuse them anytime we want to do one of these operations. And so I'm going to use that Jaeger code as an example today so you can see how this works. But before we go any further, I do need to mention that because we're using mods, a pro account is required to do what I'm about to show you. Before we dive in, I'd just like to thank Roll20 for sponsoring this video. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that we have script cards installed in our game. So go to your mods page and just make sure you've got script cards loaded here. If you don't, you can grab it from the drop down here in the mod library. Script cards comes to us from the amazing Kurt Jagers. Kurt, thank you so much for this mod. This really makes automating so many things in Roll20 much easier. So thank you for all the hard work you do for the community. Once you've got script cards loaded, we're ready to start writing our code. Now what you're seeing are some script cards that I've previously written for the Jaeger class in D&D 5th edition. And in fact, one of my previous videos, you actually got to watch me build this one out. I'll pop a card to the link for that video so you can check it out if you're interested. But all of these Jaeger script cards have common operations. They all check to see if the Jaeger has focus points available to fuel their focus arts, and if they don't, they display a message to the user and exit out of the card. Additionally, Jaegers also generate a resource called momentum dice when they spend their focus points. And each one of my Jaeger script cards is going to have that logic in here as well, where we check to see if we already have the maximum number of momentum dice, and if we do, then we don't add any more. So we want to take these commonly used operations and put them into a library so that we don't have to keep rewriting them over and over again. So I'm going to split my screen here, and on the left side is the code that I've already written, the actual script cards themselves, and on the right side, this is going to be the library that we create. So the first thing I'm going to do is put in a little bit of documentation here. I'm just going to paste in a couple of lines, and so these lines that start with -- / and a pipe are just comments. It's just descriptive text about what this code is doing. So this is going to be a Jaeger library for 5e Jaeger functions. Now, as we look at the code for this card, essentially what's happening here is we start out by looking to see if the Jaeger has focus points available. And if they don't, we immediately exit out of the card. But if they do have focus points, a little bit later on, we're going to deduct one focus point from our character sheet. So really what would make more sense would be to combine this into a single operation that checks to see if we have focus points, and if we do, deduct one, otherwise exit out of the card. So to do that, let's go into our library, and on a new line, we're going to type in -- and then Jaeger deduct focus point. And then we're also going to put in -- pipe. Okay, so what are we looking at here? -- tells script cards that this is a branch label, meaning that we can jump to this spot in our library, we'll run some code, and then when we hit this marker, we're going to jump back into our script card. So everything between this line and this line will be considered part of the Jaeger deduct focus point function. So let's put some code in that function. And if we look at the code right here that's checking to see if we have focus points, you can see that we're using a couple of variables. We have the Jaeger variable, which is our character ID, and then we also have the focus point variable, which maps back to the class resource section of our character sheet. And we need to get that information into our deduct focus point function in order for it to work. So let's start with our Jaeger's character ID. One thing to know about ScriptCard libraries is you can't use the @ bracket syntax within them. So we can't just copy and paste this line from our ScriptCard into our library. And honestly, we wouldn't want to, simply because then we'd effectively be hard coding the library to only work for this specific character. And if we have multiple Jaegers in our party, or if later on down the road, one of our Jaegers dies off and a new one comes on, we would have to go into the library and edit it to account for the new character, and that would be inefficient. So instead, what we're going to do is take whatever value is currently stored in the Jaeger variable, and we're going to pass that into the library. And the way we do that is by putting a pipe after the function name, and then a name for the variable. And we're just going to say that this will be the Jaeger ID. So we're going to take whatever value is in Jaeger, and we're going to pass it into Jaeger ID, and we'll see exactly how the syntax for that works a little bit later on. But for right now, just know that we're going to pass that value into this function. The focus points, though, that will be the same for every single Jaeger that we work with, because every Jaeger's focus points will be in their class resource. So for that, we can just copy and paste this line over, and I'm just going to indent that a little bit. Okay, so we've got our Jaeger ID and our focus points. The next thing we need to do is get in the comparison here, where we check to see if the current number of focus points that we have is less than or equal to 0, and if that's the case, we're going to say that we're out of focus points. So I'm just going to actually copy and paste these lines right over as well. And then finally, let's grab the line where we actually deduct a focus point too. So I'm just going to copy this and bring it over. All right, so far so good, but we're going to make a couple more tweaks here. For starters, I'm going to get rid of this code block that we have inside the function right now. The reason being is that these code blocks sometimes can cause problems if the code gets nested. So if you call this function from within another code block, having a code block inside a code block can cause issues. So we're going to eliminate that problem, and we're actually going to take this code block out completely. I'm actually going to cut this. I'm going to come down to a fresh line, and I'm going to create a second function called Jaeger out of focus points. And then I'm just going to paste in that code, and really all it's going to do is say that we are out of focus points. So how do we actually hit this now? So instead of calling a code block, what we're going to say is Jaeger out of focus points. So if we have less than or equal to 0 focus points, we're going to call Jaeger out of focus points. We're going to jump down here, put a message out saying you're out of focus points, and then we exit, and that will stop execution. But if we do have at least one focus point, then we're going to deduct one focus point from our class resource section of our character sheet. Now, there's one thing left to do here. You may have noticed that we're using the Jaeger variable here, but we don't actually have the Jaeger variable. We just have the Jaeger ID. So what we're going to do is add one more line here where we say -- ampersand, and we're going to put in our Jaeger, and that is going to be equal to this parameter here. But the thing to know about this is you don't refer to the parameter based on its name. Instead, you refer to it based on its index, that is, its position in the argument list here. So this is the first parameter being passed into deduct focus point. Actually, it's the only one, but still, it's the first one. So we're going to refer to it as parameter number 1. And the way you do that is like this, with square brackets, 2% signs, and then the number of the parameter. So Jaeger ID is the first parameter being passed into this function. We're going to take that ID, we're going to assign it to a variable inside here called Jaeger. And then we'll be able to use that Jaeger variable down here on line 7 and also on line 9. So if we'd had multiple parameters that we were passing in here, so like if I had another parameter, then this another parameter would actually be referred to as 2. and so on and so forth, right? So you can pass multiple parameters into a function, and you're just going to refer to those parameters based on their index. So I'm going to get rid of these because we don't actually need them. And so now we've completed our deduct focus point function. We can come back into our original script card and we can delete the lines of code that are now handled by that function. So we're going to get rid of this line right here. We're going to get rid of this little code block right here. And we're also going to get rid of this line down here. And we can replace all of that with a single call to our deduct focus point function. And to do that, we're going to put in dash dash, a greater than symbol, the function that we want to call, Jaeger underscore deduct focus point. And then we're going to pass in our Jaeger ID, which is going to be this variable right here. So as you can see, we've just reduced the number of lines of code that make up this script card, and it's a little more straightforward in terms of what's going on. We're going to deduct a focus point. Okay, cool. So now how do we get this library into Roll20 so that the script cards can use it? All right, well, I'm going to jump into my game here. And the way we create a library is by creating a handout. And the handout is going to be called ScriptCards Library, and then the name of the library. I'm going to call this the Jaeger library. And it's very important that you name your libraries like this. It has to be the word script cards, it has to have the word library, and then the name of your library. And this is case sensitive, so make sure you do it exactly like this. And then what you want to do is come down and in the description and notes section, we're just going to copy and paste the code from our library right here, save that. And now this library is accessible to your script cards. So let's jump back into our code here. And there's one more line that I'm going to add to the top of my script card. And that's going to be 3 pluses and then Jaeger and 3 more pluses. And this means that we are going to use the Jaeger library. So this right here is going to match this word right here. Okay, so let's take it for a spin and see if it works. So let's open up Keratos's character sheet here. And Keratos currently has 1 focus point, so he's got stuff to work with. I'm going to copy this script card right here. I'm going to paste it into chat, run it. There we go. We see that the script card has been rendered and a focus point has been deducted. So we successfully called the library from our script card. And let's test this to make sure we get the right message when we don't have any focus points left. So I'm just going to press up on the keyboard to run that again. And there we go. We get a message saying that we are out of focus points. So we have successfully moved that code from the script card into our library. Fantastic. Let's bring back our notepad windows here. And I'm going to create a new function called Jaeger handle momentum dice. Just like before, we're going to pass in a Jaeger ID to this function. And now let's go through and let's look at the pieces of code in the script card that we want to move over. So the momentum dice are in the other resource section of our character sheet. So I'm going to bring that over. And then we also want to do this calculation that determines the current number of momentum dice. So we're going to grab that. And then we're also going to grab these lines here, which calculate how many momentum dice the Jaeger can have at any given time. And that is based off of their proficiency bonus and either their strength or their dexterity modifier, whichever is higher. And that's handled by these 2 lines of code right here. So we're just going to copy that and bring those over. And then finally, we've got this code block right here, which is doing the determination of whether or not we can add a momentum die to the pool. So let's go ahead and throw that in. Just like before, we need to remove this code block. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to create another function called Jaeger max momentum dice. And all that's going to do is output a message to the user saying that they already have the maximum number of momentum dice. And just like before with the focus points, then we'll exit out of the card. So I'm going to change this chunk right here to say Jaeger max momentum dice, and then we'll get rid of this. And I'm going to stretch this window a little bit more so that things aren't wrapping quite so badly. I'll make this a little easier to read. And there we go. All right, so now what we can do is come back into our original script card and we can remove these lines of code. So let's get rid of the calculations being performed for the momentum dice up top here. And then we'll also get rid of this code block down here. And at the very end, after we do all this stuff, we'll say that we are going to call the Jaeger handle momentum dice. And again, we're going to pass in our Jaeger's ID to that function. So that's going to take care of all this. And you can see now that our code has gotten a lot shorter. This is a lot cleaner and much easier to read. We're going to go through and we're going to deduct a focus point. We've got the description of the focus art. We've got the actual rolls that are relevant to that, and then we're handling the momentum dice. So this has gone from 24 or 25 lines down to 12, which is much cleaner and tighter. So let's get this new code into our library. So we're just going to copy everything here. We're going to jump back into our game. I'm going to bring back the Jaeger library, edit it. I'm just going to delete everything that's currently in here and paste fresh. Save our changes. Let's give Keratos a couple of focus points here. I'm going to copy the new code for our script card, paste that in. Okay, so we currently have 2 focus points and 3 momentum dice. Run this. And there we go. We successfully deducted 1 focus point and added 1 momentum die. And so the library is working properly. So now I can come through and I can clean up my other script card that I've created to do the exact same thing. And again, I'm just going to blow away a whole bunch of this extraneous code now that I don't need anymore because I've got it in functions, and we're just going to replace it with the deducting focus point function. I'm just going to copy and paste that down, and then same thing with handling the momentum dice, copy that and bring it in. And this function went from somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 something lines down to what, like, well, a lot less than that. But the other nice thing about this is it also makes it much faster for you to build out new script cards. So if we jump back to the compendium real quick and we look in Steinhardt's Guide to the Eldritch Hunt for additional focus arts that your Jaeger can use, we've got this one here called Flourish, which lets you spend 1 focus point and gain 2 momentum dice. And let's jump back into our code. So I'm going to create a brand new script card. So script. And its title is going to be Flourish. Just like before, we're going to have our Jaeger's character ID, and then we're going to deduct a focus point. We're going to display the description of our focus art, and then we gain 2 momentum dice, which we can address by calling the handle momentum dice function twice. So once and twice. And now the final thing we need to do is tell the script card to use our library, which again is 3 plus signs, the word Jaeger, and 3 more plus signs. And now we can copy this, jump back into our game, and Keratos currently has 1 focus point and 4 momentum dice. And he can only have 5 because it's your dexterity bonus plus your proficiency bonus in Keratos' case, so that's 5. So what we're going to do is run this, and when we run this, we should see that we deduct 1 focus point, and even though this should add 2 momentum dice, it will only add 1 because that's all Keratos can handle. So let's try it out. And there we go. We see that we have the maximum number of momentum dice now. So if we give this back and drop them back down to, say, 3, we'll run this again. And there we go. It deducted 1 focus point and added 2 momentum dice. So this is working properly, and we were able to build out that new card really, really fast. Couple of troubleshooting tips for when you're working with this. Always make sure that you've actually added the library command to your script card. I can't tell you folks how many times during the course of developing this video I messed up and forgot to include that. So just remember to make sure you put that in your script card so that it knows to use the library that you're creating. And second, always remember to actually copy and paste the code from your library into the handout. This was something else that I struggled with a few times where I made changes to this code and then just forgot to post it into the handout in Roll20, and I couldn't figure out why the code wasn't working, and it was because the code wasn't actually there. So remember, add your library command into the script card and then make sure you've got the right code from your notepad window or whatever your IDE is in Roll20's library handout. So there you have it, how to use script card libraries in Roll20. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a like and consider subscribing. And until next time, folks, have a great day.